Something was off at the palace. No public appearances, no statements, not even a whisper from Kensington's gates. And then, the news broke not with a bang, but with a hush that chilled the nation. Princess Catherine, devastated. The kind of heartbreak no title could protect her from. Viewers around the world gasped. What had happened? And why was the firm so determined to keep it quiet? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It began as a flicker of curiosity, barely a blip on the media's radar, a missed engagement here, a delayed appearance there. At first, the palace downplayed it. Private time, they called it. A moment for reflection. A need for privacy in a demanding role. But something didn't add up. Royal watchers accustomed to the rhythm of public duties felt the tremor beneath the surface. Catherine was gone from the spotlight, and Kensington had gone quiet, far too quiet. No radiant smiles, no patronage visits, no family photos released to reassure the public. Just silence. And silence, in royal circles, is never innocent. Inside the palace, aides moved like ghosts. Normally quick to leak charming details or stage manage appearances, they now avoided reporters entirely. Those who dared to probe were met with tight lips and icy stares. The usual choreography of royal PR had fractured. Something real, something painful was happening behind those historic walls. It wasn't long before the illusion shattered. A single clip leaked from a long-lens camera. Prince William, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, pacing into Kensington Palace at dusk. He looked shattered, unshaven, distracted, and refusing to answer shouted questions from the press. In that moment, the truth was no longer a rumor. It was visible. It was raw, and it sent a chill down the spines of those who saw it. Online, speculation ignited like wildfire. Was it a health crisis? A betrayal from inside the family? Or had Catherine chosen to walk away from royal life altogether? Theories collided across forums and social media like a frenzy of whispers trying to break into a scream. Everyone had a version, but none had answers. And while Buckingham Palace remained tight-lipped, the pressure mounted. Commentators demanded clarity. Fans begged for updates. The country was holding its breath. Then came the statement, a cold, detached collection of words issued from the Royal Press Office. Personal developments. It read, no further comment, no hint of compassion, no comfort for the millions who had grown up seeing Catherine as a symbol of grace and modern royalty. But those two words, so sterile, so hollow, only deepened the mystery. If this was personal, then why was the entire family circling their wagons? Why was the press suddenly tamed? Why did it feel like something far bigger was being concealed? But beneath the official silence, a storm was brewing, and the first signs of emotional collapse would surface not from Catherine herself, but from someone no one expected. He's the future king trained to endure, raised to lead. But what happens when duty is shattered by the one thing he cannot control? Love. Cameras caught Prince William in an unguarded moment that stunned the nation. The truth behind that single, haunted expression would rip open the illusion of royal perfection and reveal heartbreak that runs far deeper than headlines could ever explain. When Prince William stepped into that engagement alone, all eyes were on him, not for his title, not for the ceremonial handshake, but for the flicker of something unmistakably human. As he paused mid-speech, his voice cracked. He turned away, just briefly, but long enough for cameras to capture it, a single tear, discreetly wiped. It wasn't stage-managed. It wasn't polished. And it wasn't ignored. Across the world, audiences held their breath. For a man trained to suppress emotion, the dam had cracked, and behind it lay a flood of pain far greater than the monarchy wanted anyone to see. Within hours, a palace insider quietly confirmed what many had feared. Just enough to ignite a firestorm of questions that the crown could no longer extinguish. Behind closed doors, the weight of the crown had never felt heavier. William was trapped between two identities, heir to the throne and husband to a woman unraveling behind palace walls. As Catherine's condition worsened, the demands of tradition only tightened. Engagements didn't stop, expectations didn't pause, and yet, at every step, his thoughts were back home where she lay fragile, where their children clung to hope, where silence had become a cruel constant. William, once seen as stoic and unshakable, began to unravel. Friends described him as sleepless, restless, and distracted. His team shielded him as best they could, but the truth seeped out in whispers. "He's fighting battles on every front," one aide confided. "He's never looked more royal, or more broken." And the pressure only mounted. Catherine, fiercely private, had pulled their children close, refusing to let them witness the full extent of her anguish. George had stopped asking when Mummy would join them. Charlotte clung tighter during bedtime stories. Louis, too young to understand, kept asking why the house felt quiet. It was in that silence that William began to see the monarchy for what it was, not a fortress, but a cage. Every protocol, every duty, every expectation now stood between him and the one person he loved most. And when he asked for time, just a few weeks, maybe less, the answer wasn't a gentle no, it was a warning. "There are obligations, sir," a senior courtier allegedly said. "Your role must come first." The words lit a fuse. Heated arguments erupted behind the gilded doors. William clashed with senior royals, voices raised in corridors never meant to echo such conflict. He demanded privacy, space, compassion. One courtier would later whisper to a journalist, under strict anonymity, he was ready to walk away from everything, titles, power, all of it, for her. And in that moment, the myth of the unshakable monarchy was shattered, because beneath the crowns and ceremony was a man on the edge, not of rage, but of heartbreak. And as William wrestled with impossible choices, Catherine was confronting something even more terrifying, the ghosts of her past, and a decision no princess should ever face alone. Hidden in a private drawer, discovered by a staff member who was later dismissed without explanation, was a handwritten letter Catherine never meant for the world to see. In it, a confession so vulnerable, so brutally honest, it shook those who read it to their core. The truth was no longer just painful, it was irreversible. The letter was folded delicately, tucked away in a worn notebook beneath a collection of children's drawings and birthday cards, every line written in Catherine's own graceful hand. Addressed simply, "To my children, in case I'm not there." It was not a cry for help, but a farewell wrapped in grace. Those who caught a glimpse of its contents spoke of a tone that crushed the soul, filled with maternal warmth, quiet despair, and a haunting sense of finality. She spoke not of titles or royal duties, but of lullabies, scraped knees, and whispered goodnights. Of memories she feared she wouldn't get to create. The letter was not long, but its weight was immeasurable. In it, she hinted carefully, but unmistakably, at a serious medical condition. The kind of illness that shadows your every breath, even when you smile for the cameras. She didn't name it. She didn't have to. But the most chilling part wasn't about her health. It was the line that stopped readers cold. A single phrase. "I was betrayed by someone I once called family." The word betrayal underlined, once. No names, no accusations, but the implication hung like a guillotine over the palace. The handwriting, still steady, betrayed none of the storm that must have raged within her. She wrote not with rage, but with clarity, with resignation. She spoke of acceptance, of trusting William, of shielding the children, and of hoping they would one day understand why she chose silence over scandal. But for those who read it, those few royal aides and staff trusted enough to see it, the damage was done. Several reportedly broke down in tears. One, it is said, resigned immediately. Another requested a reassignment away from Kensington. The palace moved quickly. The staff member who found the letter was let go without public explanation. Internal conversations were locked down. No one was to speak of it. No one. But secrets in the royal household never remain buried for long. Rumours began to leak, first to friends of friends, then to carefully placed anonymous sources in the tabloid press, whispers of a hidden letter, talk of a farewell. The palace scrambled, releasing soft, deflective messaging about renewed focus on family life and restorative time. But behind the diplomatic phrasing was a very different reality. A royal wife preparing for an absence she feared might be permanent, and doing so without alerting the world. Or perhaps because she didn't trust the world anymore. The emotional ripple of the letter was irreversible. It marked a point of no return, not just for Catherine, but for those around her. And it raised one impossible question, one that royal insiders would wrestle with in hushed tones for weeks to come. But who had betrayed Catherine, and why? The answer, heartbreakingly, would circle back to one woman who has always been both her shadow and her greatest rival. It wasn't just grief, it was betrayal. And the name whispered behind the walls of Windsor was Camilla. In a confrontation too volatile for public record, Catherine and the Queen Consort came face to face, and what transpired that day, in the privacy of Clarence House, would redefine the monarchy's future in one whispered sentence: "You'll never be queen. Not while I still breathe." The confrontation had been inevitable. Tensions had simmered for months beneath the surface, but it was the leaked contents of Catherine's letter that finally detonated the fragile civility holding everything together. Behind closed doors, far from the flashing cameras and rehearsed grins, Catherine arrived not as a princess, but as a woman pushed to her breaking point. The room was thick with unspoken fury as Camilla waited, lips tight, eyes cold. According to sources close to the encounter, the exchange was less a conversation and more a clash between two women who represented two very different futures for the crown. What began with clipped pleasantries quickly turned venomous. Camilla, reportedly infuriated by what she called calculated sympathy plays, wasted no time in accusing Catherine of manipulating public sentiment to overshadow the Queen Consort's own standing. But it was her veiled threat, spoken low, sharp, and unmistakably cruel, that sent shockwaves through the palace. "You'll never be queen," she hissed. "Not while I still breathe." That single line, whispered in the safety of royal insulation, marked a turning point. It wasn't just jealousy. It was war. Camilla had always felt uneasy about Catherine's rising star, how effortlessly the younger woman commanded loyalty, how the public clung to her image as the ideal royal. For Camilla, who had fought decades for acceptance, Catherine's widespread adoration felt like a slap to the face. Now, with Catherine vulnerable and weakened, Camilla saw an opportunity to reassert control until that moment of confrontation backfired. Word of the altercation didn't stay buried. It seeped through cracks in the palace walls, carried by whispers and sideways glances. Senior staff who had once bowed to Camilla's authority began to drift. Catherine, though shaken, was never truly alone. Allies like Princess Anne and Duchess Sophie quietly closed ranks around her, refusing to indulge in the Queen Consort's narrative. Even the media, once quick to draw comparisons between the two women, now shifted in tone, more sympathetic to Catherine, more critical of Camilla's presence at official events. William's fury, however, was volcanic. Learning of the confrontation, he reportedly stormed out of a scheduled meeting and demanded an apology directly from Clarence House. None came. Charles, caught between loyalty to his wife and fear of alienating his heir, chose silence, a choice that fractured the already fragile father-son relationship. William began to speak less with his father, confiding instead in Anne and Edward, building a quiet but growing power block within the royal family. The tension wasn't just personal, it was structural. The monarchy had split, not publicly, but unmistakably. On one side stood the old guard, Camilla, Charles, and their loyalists. On the other, the future, Catherine, William, and those who saw in them a vision of a more modern, more compassionate crown. But as royal insiders tried to manage the fallout, few knew the full gravity of what was still unfolding behind palace gates. Catherine wasn't just fighting for her place, she was fighting for her future, and for something far more terrifying than titles or succession battles: But while Catherine battled the royal machine from within, another challenge loomed, one that no title or lineage could protect her from: a devastating diagnosis. It began as fatigue, then silence, then missed engagements. But now we know. Behind the smiles and handshakes, Catherine was facing a private war against her own body. The diagnosis shocked the palace and left the public shattered. And yet, somehow, the worst was still to come. For months, the signs had been there, subtle, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable to those who truly paid attention. A cancelled trip here, an unexplained absence there. At first, it was brushed off as exhaustion, the inevitable toll of royal life. But soon, the pattern grew too heavy to ignore. Catherine, once the heartbeat of every engagement, had vanished from the rhythm of royal visibility. Behind the scenes, she was enduring a reality more brutal than any headline dared to imagine. Under assumed names and tight security, she began slipping into private clinics, not once, but several times over the course of weeks. Each visit marked a growing fear that something more sinister was at play. And eventually, there it was, the moment the speculation turned into certainty. A diagnosis, confirmed in hushed meetings, guarded by protocol and dread. One insider later admitted, "It's not minor, it's life-altering." But Catherine didn't crumble, at least not publicly. Her first instinct wasn't to inform the world, or even the wider royal circle. It was to shield her children. In her eyes, they came first always. She refused to let George, Charlotte, and Louis see fear reflected in her face. She smiled for them, played with them, held them longer at night. But behind closed doors, the weight became unbearable. She grew thinner, quieter, and yet she continued to fight not against the illness alone, but against the royal machine's hunger to control the narrative. It was Catherine's condition, her timeline, her story, and she wanted to tell it only when the time was right, if at all. For William, the torment was unspeakable. He became a man divided, stretched thin between the iron chains of monarchy and the woman silently slipping through his fingers. He attended engagements with forced composure, then rushed to hospital bedsides in the dark. He signed documents in royal offices while texting doctors from beneath the table. Nothing about his life belonged to him anymore, not his time, not his grief, not even his rage. And still, the crown demanded more. It expected resilience, it expected visibility. But William's loyalty was no longer to the institution, it was to the woman who had sacrificed everything to uphold it. In the background, family dynamics shifted. Princess Anne, stoic, pragmatic, unshakable, stepped in without a word. She took on additional duties, shielded the press, rerouted engagements. Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, offered comfort where the palace could not, supporting Catherine not as a duchess but as a sister. This quiet alliance became Catherine's only refuge within the walls of power. And though no statement was made, the message was clear. And the people watched, growing uneasy, sensing the weight of a truth they were not yet being told. But as Catherine's world grew darker, something unexpected happened. The British public, often skeptical, often cruel, united behind her in an extraordinary show of support. In a time of royal fatigue and national cynicism, something remarkable happened. When the truth emerged about Catherine's condition, Britain didn't judge, it rallied. Across the country, landmarks lit in soft royal blue. Children sent handmade cards. For the first time in a long time, the monarchy felt human again. It was as if a veil had been lifted. The distance between royalty and people, so carefully preserved by centuries of ceremony, suddenly dissolved. Catherine's struggle had pierced through the marble walls of monarchy, touching something raw in the hearts of millions. Vigils sprung up in towns and cities, candles flickering along railings and church steps, each flame a quiet symbol of hope. In parks, people gathered without fanfare, leaving flowers, drawings, poems. Social media flooded with messages not of gossip or scandal, but of solidarity. Stand with Catherine trended across platforms for days, filled with photos, tributes, and memories of her quiet acts of compassion. Mothers wrote of how she'd inspired them. Survivors spoke of her strength. For once, the story wasn't curated by palace press officers, it was written by the people. Celebrities who normally skirted around royal issues suddenly spoke up. A-list names and national icons used their platforms to voice support, not just for Catherine's health, but for her right to be treated as a human being first and a princess second. From actors to athletes, voices rose in unison: protect her, lift her, stand by her. Even those long skeptical of the firm acknowledged something had shifted. The narrative had broken free of protocol, and what emerged wasn't scandal, it was love. News outlets that once thrived on dissecting Catherine's wardrobe choices or imagined rivalries took a sharp turn. Coverage became tender, reverent. Paparazzi backed off, some even issued apologies. The press, for so long a double-edged sword, had turned protective. Even tabloid editors admitted privately, there's no appetite to attack her now. Instead, they ran retrospectives, montages of her charity work, her bond with children, her role as a mother navigating unimaginable pressure. It wasn't manufactured, it was earned, and it resonated. But not everyone basked in the glow of public empathy. The shift in mood brought with it a subtle but growing backlash against those seen as antagonistic to Catherine's place within the monarchy. Camilla, once slowly carving out her space, now found herself at the center of quiet outrage. Online calls for her to step aside grew louder with each passing day. Petitions circulated. Comment sections exploded with fury. The public, once divided, had chosen their queen, and it wasn't the one currently wearing the crown. This wasn't just emotion, it was collective resistance, a nation drawing a line. And then came the moment that broke even the hardest hearts. During a brief appearance by William at a community fundraiser, he was handed a microphone. He hadn't planned to speak, but with the nation watching, he paused and said only this: "My daughter Charlotte asked me to read something." He pulled out a folded note and began, his voice trembling. "Mummy, you are the bravest person in the world. We love you more than all the stars." The room fell silent. Across the country, tears flowed. The monarchy had never felt so painfully real. But behind the wave of sympathy was a palace still divided. And the next move would come not from Catherine or William, but from the king himself. No one saw it coming. As the family reeled from Catherine's revelation, King Charles made a decision behind closed doors, one that would tilt the balance of royal power forever. His choice stunned Camilla, and for the first time, Catherine's heartbreak had sparked something even she couldn't anticipate: a reckoning. The summons to Sandringham came without warning. It was simply an urgent review, the kind of phrasing that hinted at significance without revealing the storm beneath. Every key player was in attendance: Charles, Camilla, Anne, Edward, and William. Catherine, notably, was not. She remained at Kensington, unaware that the institution she had long served was about to make a decision that would change her place in it forever. As the doors closed on the meeting room, it became clear this was no routine agenda. This was a crisis response. Catherine's declining health had shaken public faith, but it had also done something more dangerous: exposed the fracture lines within the monarchy's core. And Charles, ever the strategist, knew he could no longer afford to ignore them. What followed was less discussion, more confrontation. Camilla, still smarting from the wave of public backlash and media scrutiny, pushed for continuity. She argued that the monarchy needed stability, not sentimentality. But her tone, say insiders, was cold. Detached, she reportedly dismissed the public outpouring for Catherine as performative sympathy. Because while Charles had once leaned on Camilla's counsel, the weight of national feeling had forced him into a corner. Princess Anne and Prince Edward, both seasoned in duty and unimpressed by drama, stood firmly with William. Their message was simple: the future of the monarchy lay with Catherine, not as a figurehead, but as its heart. Her resilience, her dignity, her grace under pressure, It had done what no strategic marriage or ceremonial pledge ever could. It had won the people. In a moment that reportedly silenced the room, Charles laid out a vision that caught even his closest aides off guard. A restructuring of ceremonial roles, a rebalancing of visibility and influence. And at its core, a private but powerful designation. Catherine would be recognized in internal documents as Queen in Waiting. It wasn't a coronation, it wasn't even public. But it was clear. The line of succession was no longer just a matter of blood. It was a matter of trust. The monarchy, for all its tradition, had decided to modernize in the most human way possible by rewarding loyalty, humility, and quiet strength. Camilla was reportedly blindsided. Her reaction, according to one courtier, was a mix of shock and fury. She had fought for decades to earn her position. Now, in the space of a single meeting, the tide had turned. She was still queen consort. But the room knew. The crown's emotional center had shifted. And the leaked memo that surfaced days later confirmed it. A simple phrase, buried deep within royal briefing notes. Catherine is the future. We must protect the crown. But Catherine's response to this unexpected royal elevation would leave even her closest allies in shock because she wasn't focused on titles. She had something far more powerful to say. She didn't appear in a gown. There were no jewels, no scripted pageantry. Just a woman, a mother, a wife speaking from the heart. When Catherine finally broke her silence, the world stopped. Her voice shook, her message stunned. And by the end, there wasn't a dry eye in Britain. The palace had not announced the address. There was no grand press release or ceremonial build-up. And yet, when Catherine appeared frail but determined, vulnerable but unyielding, the moment hit harder than any royal proclamation in recent memory. She looked directly into the lens, not as a princess performing her role, but as a woman bearing her soul. There were pauses, there were tremors in her voice, but every word came from the deepest corners of her truth. She began not with titles or gratitude, but with what mattered most, her children. Her voice broke slightly as she spoke of George, Charlotte, and Louis. Of bedtime stories interrupted by hospital visits, of laughter tempered by worry, and of the endless ache to preserve normalcy in a life that had spiraled far beyond it. "I never asked to be a princess," she said quietly, "only to be a good one." The line hit like a thunderclap. It stripped the grandeur of monarchy down to its rawest form, a woman trying to do her best under the weight of 1,000 expectations. And then, in the most unexpected twist, she forgave. Not just the institution, not just the pressure, but even those who had turned their backs on her. "There are those who have caused me pain," she admitted, "but I will not carry bitterness forward. I will carry only love. For my family, for this nation, and for the life I've yet to live." It was a declaration that didn't just disarm her critics, it humbled them. And then came the line that shattered hearts across the country. She looked up and said, "If I must step back, let it be to hold my children closer." It wasn't resignation. It wasn't retreat. It was a mother reclaiming her time, her space, and her right to heal without the glare of tradition. The silence that followed was deafening. There was no need for applause, no curated applause track, no royal anthems swelling in the background. Just Catherine's final words. A simple thank you to the nation that had embraced her, and a quiet promise to return not when duty demanded it, but when her heart was ready. What made the address unforgettable wasn't just what she said, it was what it meant. It signaled a shift in how the monarchy would be perceived. No longer untouchable, no longer robotic, but deeply, painfully human. Her message resonated far beyond the palace walls. In homes across the UK, people wept not just for Catherine, but for everything she symbolized: grace in pain, strength in silence, and dignity in the face of betrayal. She had been crowned not with a title, but with the public's trust. And in doing so, she had transcended the role she was given. But as the camera faded to black, one question remained. Was this the end of Catherine's public life, or the beginning of something even more transformative? She didn't seek power, she didn't seek attention. Yet in heartbreak, Catherine became a symbol not of royalty, but of humanity. And now, as the monarchy enters its most uncertain chapter yet, one thing is clear: nothing will ever be the same again. In a family built on tradition, where silence is often mistaken for strength and image valued above vulnerability, Catherine redefined what it meant to wear a crown. Not through grandeur or spectacle, but through grace, resilience, and the courage to let the world see her break and still rise. Her journey forced the monarchy to look inward, to question the weight of its own rigidity. It revealed a truth too long ignored: that empathy, not etiquette, is what truly connects the crown to the people. She bridged that gap without effort, without performance, simply by being real. And in doing so, she made the monarchy feel less like a fortress and more like a family again. Within the palace walls, the change was irreversible. Protocols were softened. Walls of indifference cracked. Even the most stoic members of the royal household began to speak in softer tones. Her ordeal had exposed the fragility not only of one woman, but of the institution itself. And that revelation, painful though it was, breathed life into a monarchy many believed had lost its soul. Public voices began demanding a new path forward, one not built on hierarchy alone, but on humanity. One where emotion was not weakness, but strength, where a mother's tears held as much weight as a royal decree. Catherine may have stepped back from the spotlight, but her presence lingered everywhere in the shifted tone of public discourse, in the newfound compassion in royal engagements, and in the echoes of her laughter with her children, captured in rare moments and now preserved like sacred heirlooms. That laughter, frozen in time, will forever remind the world that beyond the titles and tiaras lies a woman who lived, who loved, and who led with her heart. Before we close, remember, the crown may be inherited, but respect is earned. And Catherine just redefined both. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.